got a new iPhone, huh?
Yeah.
Is it better?
Donation. Yep.
Why is it better?
It's a high picture quality.
Ah, okay, good. Yeah, well, that's good. Although the picture quality was still pretty good before.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's good. Okay. Okay, mobile phone. Silent. These are good mridungas, aren't they? Consistently hold their tune and sound good for a piece of plastic. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hare. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Vallabha Girivardhari. Yasodanandana Prajajana Ranjana. Yasodanandana Prajajana Ranjana. Jamuna Tiravana Chari. Jamuna Tiravana Chari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hare. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yasodanandana Prajajana Ranjana. Yasodanandana Prajajana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hare. Jayam Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivajikacharya Ashto Tarasata Śrīmad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananda Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Prem Se Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai C. Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinatha Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Sri Vrindavan Dham Ki Sri Mayapur Navadvip Dham Ki Sri Purushottam Kshetra Ki Sri Ganga Maya Ki Jai Sri Jamuna Maya Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Maharani Ki Jai Harinam Sankirtana Ki Jai Srila Prabhupada's Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai Nitai Gaura Premanandi. Oh, glories to the assembled devotees. Oh, glories to the assembled devotees. Oh, glories to the assembled devotees. Oh, glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Oh, glories to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Vishwaraya Krishna Stabila Smari Buddhijam Prabhupada Namo Vishwaraya Krishna Stabila Smari Bhaktivedanta Swami Janamane Namaste. Sarvati Devi Gauravani Pacharana Nivasisi Sanyavadi Paschatjate Chitarane. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. We're reading from Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Canto 9, Chapter 14, text number 46. Is that right? Tasya nimantanaj jato jata veda vibhavasaha. Actually, that's yes. Jata veda vibhavasahu. Trayasa vidyaya ragya. Putratve kaupitas trivit. Tasyar nimantanaj jato. Jata veda vibhavasahu. Trayasa vidyaya ragya. Putratve kalpitas tribrit. Tasyani mantanaj jato. Jata veda vibhavasahu. Trayasa vidyaya ragya. Putratve kalpitas trivrit. Tasyani mantanaj jato. Jata veda vibhavasu. Sijaya ragya. Putratve kalpitas trivit. Tasyani mantanaj jato. Jata veda vibhavasu. Trayasa vidyaya ragya. Putratve kalpitas trivit. tasya, of Pururava, nimantanat, because of interaction, jataha, was born, jatavedaha, meant for material enjoyment, according to the Vedic principles. Vibhavasahu, a fire. Traya, following the Vedic principles. Saha, the fire. Vijaya, by such a process. Ragya, by the king. Putratve, a son's being born. Kalpitaha, it so became. Trivrit, the three letters A, U, M, combined together as Om. From Pururava's rubbing of the Aranis came a fire. By such a fire, one can achieve all success in material enjoyment and be purified in seminal birth, initiation, and in the performance of sacrifice, which are invoked with the combined letters A, U, M. Thus the fire was considered the son of King Pururava. Purport. According to the Vedic process, one can get a son through semen, shukra. One can get a bona fide disciple through initiation, savitra, or one can get a son or disciple through the fire of sacrifice, yajna. Thus, when Maharaj Pururava generated the fire by rubbing the Aranis, the fire became his son. Either by semen, by initiation, or by yajna, one may get a son. The Vedic mantra Omkar or Pranava, consisting of the letters A, U, M, can call each of these three methods into existence. Therefore the words Nimantanaj Jataha indicate that by the rubbing of the Aranis, a son was born. Right. I decided, after reading this a few times, that this is basically storyline, but although it is relevant, well, obviously, every verse of the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam is appropriate, right? But it becomes more clearly into perspective if we read the next verse, which is what I'm going to do. Tenaya jata yagyesham bhagavantam adokshajam uvasi lokam anvitschan sarvadeva mayam harim. By means of that fire, Pururava, who desired to go to the planet where Urvasi resided, performed a sacrifice, by which he satisfied the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hare, the enjoyer of the results of sacrifice. Right, because the previous verse is about sacrifice, actually. And so that comes more clearly into focus in the context of the next verse explains it. Or it doesn't explain it, but it gives us a broader understanding. And why he did it. So Pururava performed a sacrifice by which he satisfied the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hare, the enjoyer of the results of sacrifice. right? Thus, he worshipped the Lord who is beyond the perception of the senses and is the reservoir of all the demigods. Purport. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Bhoktaram Jagyatapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram. Any loka or planet to which one wants to go is the property of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the enjoyer of the performance of sacrifice. The purpose of yajna is to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In this age, as we have explained many times, the yajna of chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra is the only sacrifice that can satisfy the Supreme Lord. When the Lord is satisfied, one can fulfill any desire, material or spiritual. Bhagavad Gita chapter 3, text 14 also says, Yagyad bhavati parajanyaha. By offering sacrifices to Lord Vishnu, one can have sufficient rainfall. When there is sufficient rainfall, the earth becomes fit to produce everything. Sarva kama dugha mahi. If one can utilize the land properly, one can get all the necessities of life from the land, including food grains, fruits, flowers and vegetables. Everything one gets for material wealth is produced from the earth, and therefore it is said, Sarva kama dugha mahi. What does that mean, Sarva kama dugha mahi? It means everything calm. Sarva kama, all desires. Pretty much that means all desires. Dugha, the producer of the satisfaction of all desires. Mahi is the land. Right? This is quote. This is from in the purport 110.4. Right, so everything comes from the land. And then what does Prabhupada say? Everything is possible by performing yajna, which is what Pururava had done in the previous few verses, and even in this one. He was performing a sacrifice. Therefore, although Pururava desired something material, he factually performed yajna to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord is adhokshaja, beyond the perception of Pururava and everyone else. That includes us. Consequently, some kind of yajna must be performed to fulfill the desires of the living entity. Yajnas can be performed in human society only when society is divided by varnashram dharma into 4 varnas and 4 ashrams. Without such a regulated process, no one can perform yajnas. And without the performance of yajnas, no material plans can make human society happy at any time. Everyone should therefore be induced to perform yajnas. In this age of Kali, the yajna recommended is Sankirtan, the individual or collective chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. This will bring the fulfillment of all necessities for human society. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jananjana Salakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmaye Shri Guruve Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam jena bhutale swayam rupa kada mahiyam tadati svapadantikam mukam karoti vachalam pangum langayate garim yad kripa tamaham bande Shri Gurum Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Ishvaram Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktabinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakapatarubhyascha, Kripa Sindhubhya evacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Right. Okay. So, why was Pururava performing a sacrifice? Hands up if you think you know. Okay. Who wants to say? Rasikendra, you can tell us. Yes, he was attached. He was attracted to and attached to sense gratification, basically, right? Does that sound familiar? Huh? Attached to material sense gratification. But of course, the devotees know that even though there may be attachment for material sense gratification, really there's not much pleasure in that. And that ultimately there's a higher purpose in life other than just trying to satisfy the material, the urges, right? Vacho vegam, manasakroda vegam, jiva vegam, uttarapasta vegam, etan vegam, yo vishaheta, dira, savam apimam pritivim sasisyat. Rupa Goswami begins the Upadesha Amrita basically advising the devotees to control speech, right? The urge to speak, vacho vegam, manasakro, the pushings of the mind, especially anger, manasakroda vegam. But the mind is described as 6 enemies or 6 features, basically 6: Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moha, isn't it? Matsarya, enviousness. What's the other one? What's the other? Pushing, anyway, 6 pushings of the mind. It'll come to me. So, the recommendation for the devotees is control the mind and the senses, right? Control the urge to speak. Control the tongue's desire to eat everything and anything and everything, right? Control the urge for sense gratification broadly, especially sex life. because of the complications that come as a result of not controlling these things, right? When I was 15, I read Hermann Hesse's Siddhartha. And from reading that book, I understood, it awakened in me this understanding that we're suffering as a consequence of our karma, of reactions, right? And the Bhagavad Gita teaches, one of the numerous things that the Bhagavad Gita teaches is the nature of karma, action, right? For every vikarma or bad karma, there's a reaction. Pretty obvious, right? For every good action, there's a reaction. Good karma, right? But what the Bhagavad Gita teaches, right? And it's interesting, Prabhupada says in the Bhagavad Gita, there are many things in the Bhagavad Gita that you'll find in all religious scriptures, right? But there are things that you'll find in the Bhagavad Gita that you won't find anywhere else, right? And this feature of akarma, right? Action that doesn't produce reaction is really what the Bhagavad Gita is encouraging. And of course that's bhakti, right? And why, now I think about it, or when I think about it, why Krishna initially recommends perform activities according to the rules and regulations of the Vedas, right? And do those activities for fulfilling your desires, your material desires. It's okay, because that's the system by which we can satisfy our material proclivities, propensities. But that's done in consideration of the fact that ultimately everything belongs to Lord Vishnu, right? Because in the performance of every yajna, yajnas are it's a bit like there are rules, right? There are rules, there are guidelines. This is why the Vedas are so important. Vedic literature, and also why Prabhupada mentions in the purport here, Varna and Ashram, Varnashram, right? In order that the yajnas can be performed properly, we need a properly ordered and structured society, because it all fits within a scheme or within a system, right? Unknown to everybody, pretty much, right? So when I read Siddhartha, and there was somewhat of a systematic description of karma and the reactions that one gets from performing sinful activities, or vikarma, right? Bad karma. And of course, there was an illustration, at least in my mind, there was an illustration of the fact that we're all living entity, that we all are separate from our bodies, right? Every living entity is a jiva, or a soul, right? And that, if you kill other living entities just to satisfy your tongue, right? Jiva vegam, the push of the tongue, that's heavy, heavy, bad karma, right? Because for every living entity that you kill and devour, right, you have to take birth again as that living entity and suffer the same fate. This is karma. Right? Now that to me was profound. Right? And I didn't get that understanding from reading. It was a novel. Siddhartha's actually a novel, but this is the understanding that I know. At the time I was also reading other spiritual books. At least I thought they were spiritual. It wasn't until I started reading Prabhupada's books that I discovered spirituality And that was a huge mountain to climb. But I got this realization that I should become a vegetarian at least. I should avoid the karma of killing animals. Not easy either, by the way. Not easy. And why association is so important. Sangha, right? Satsanga. Because, in the association of the devotees especially, those things all become very easy. What's a huge challenge outside of the association of the devotees still becomes so easy, right? Do any of us have a problem about being a vegetarian? We don't even think about it. In fact, now there's not so many people coming to the temple. We've got more burfies than we know what to do with. Right? We know who's eating all the burfies, right? They're not here this morning in class. I won't mention any names. But we've missed their association. But super important. Now, but it's interesting, you see, that vision that there's a higher purpose. My understanding as a young boy, relatively young, was that there's a higher purpose for life. Right? And we see that here in the performance, in this concept of the performance of yajna. Right? There's a higher purpose to life. Why Prabhupada mentions here, what's that? Karma? What was it? Sava? Was it Sava Karma? All right, hang on. And I can't hear what you're saying. So let me just look it up. Whoop. Sava Karma Dugha Mahi. Everything comes from the earth. Right? Everything comes from the earth. But, and this is why yajna is so important, mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, mentioned in the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, right? The performance of yajna gives rise to what? Starts with an R. Hands up if you know what the word is. The performance of yajna gives rise to what? Starts with an R. A 4-letter word. You didn't put your hand up. But you got the answer right. Rain. Yes. And with rain combined with the earth, everything comes. Or everything that's ultimately needed for life and fulfillment, satisfaction. Right? And so Prabhupada makes a point in 110.4, what's the need of factories and slaughterhouses and cinemas and, modern gimmicks, right? We've all got a mobile phone and we will feel deprived, right, if we don't have a phone. If you don't have a phone, it's like, oh, what are you doing to me? Huh? Everybody's got to have a phone. So I can be better connected. This is the idea, right? You're going to be better connected. But how come, if we're all better connected, 1 in 3 people in Australia feels lonely? Right? They feel unhappy and unfulfilled. So, and we know this, no matter how many motor cars you've got, how many iPhones, we've got a new iPhone. Right? Apparently the picture is better. If you think the picture is better for class, please call reception and let them know. But it's not bad. It's good. Ultimately, because not that we need to have this kind of technology, but we use the technology for Krishna's service. That's fine. That's spirituality. Right? But we see in the modern age, so many people have got the latest iPhone, right? They've got fantastic picture quality. They're better connected than they ever were before, but they're still lonely, right? Because there's so much of this, what is required to get this technological advancement is what Prabhupada describes as ugra karma, bad karma, right? And all of that association that goes with it. That the purpose of life is sense gratification, right? And certainly, yes, we need to have some sense gratification, there's no doubt about that, right? But the Vedic process of satisfying our desires, our kam, right, is through the performance of yajna. So we see that within the culture here, that Pururava is engaged in, right? The Vedic construct, the Vedic culture, Varna and Ashrama, right? And the Varna and Ashrama system is designed to engage everybody, recognizing the 4 ashrams and the 4 basic tendencies in human beings, is to use those in a structured way under the umbrella of the performance of yajna. And even yajna performed for sense gratification is okay, because the performance of yajna is done ultimately, if it's performed properly, under the auspices of Lord Vishnu. Huh? This is what the whole performance of sacrifice within the Varnashram and within the Vedic construct is meant for. Huh? And ultimately, as is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, the performance of yajna gives rise to rain. Rainfall then brings us all of the actual necessities out of the earth that we need. And that, the kind of artificial situation that we have now, where the endeavour is for exploitation of the earth, right? And the extraction of minerals and food and cloth. We get cotton. Whatever. Of course, these days we think our cloth comes out of a factory, right? When I was a kid, my dad got us the Boy's Life. Do you know what Boy's Life is? It's the monthly magazine of the Scout movement in America. Boy's Life, very wholesome. We used to get every month. For some reason, my father had this tradition that we could get a magazine of our choice every month, right? So he chose it for us when we were young, and it was Boy's Life. And anyway, there was a cartoon in one of them, and it had a city kid finding a bunch of bottles lying on the ground, and he says to his dad, "Hey, Dad, look, I found a cow's nest." Milk bottles. So anyway, when I turned 15, Dad said, "What magazine do you want?" I said, "Rolling Stone." That was the beginning of the end. Forget about wholesome Boy's Life. It was something else. So, just to put Siddhartha and spiritual life into context, right? So, but very important, because later on, that became significant because I met the devotees, right? And then the devotees, well, because I wanted to be a vegetarian, I went to the temple to buy a cookbook, right? And then from that purchase of the cookbook and then reading the philosophy, no meat eating, no gambling, no intoxication, no illicit sex. These were profound instructions for me at the time. 20 years old, 21 years old. Right? And I had friends who were devotees. Right? Then I would talk to the devotees and they would tell me, they would help me understand this principle of karma and reincarnation. And most importantly, sacrifice. Right? But it wasn't that they were telling me, you need to perform sacrifice. What were they telling me, do you think? What were they telling me? Chant Hare Krishna. Yeah, what do the Hare Krishnas tell you to do? If there's a bottom line to anything, right, it's chant Hare Krishna. If you don't chant Hare Krishna, you're going to become a hog, dog, camel or an ass in your next life. Right? Did you know that? Didn't know that? Oh. You're pulling my leg. Yeah. So, isn't it interesting? The basis of Vedic culture is sacrifice, is yajna, right? And ultimately, what's yajna for, as is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, perform sacrifice. Initially, perform sacrifice, and if you perform sacrifice with the motivation for personal benefit, okay, it's all right. Because by the performance of sacrifice, there will be purification. Right? If it was performed properly, it'll ultimately done for the pleasure of Lord Vishnu. Jagyatat, what is it? Jagyatat? Kamano jatra, right? One has to act, and one should act with the performance of yajna in mind. So that's what Pururava is performing yajna. And so the previous purports are describing how he's taken the Arani sticks and another stick and he's rubbing them together to light the fire of the yajna. Right? This is the significance of the Arani wood. It's used with mantra to light the fire of the sacrifice, of the yajna. Right? But ultimately behind that is, again, sacrifice performed for the pleasure of Lord Vishnu. And Prabhupada explains that here in the purport. Why? Because Sarva Loka Maheshwaram, right? He's the owner of everything. So it's just like, if you lease a house from a landlord, you have to pay the rent. Right? Got to pay the rent. If you don't pay the rent, what happens? Out. Right? So this kind of understanding is important, that Lord Vishnu is he's the owner. He's the what is it? Jagyanam. What is it? Tapa. What is that verse? 5, the last verse of chapter 5. Bhaktaram. Yeah, that's what I need. Bhaktaram, the enjoyer. Bhaktaram. Jagya tapasam, right? The enjoyer of jagya, the enjoyer of tapasya, right? Is Sarva Loka Maheshwaram, the one who's the owner and controller, the Ishvaraha, Parama Krishna, right? Sarva Loka Maheshwaram, right? That's Krishna. So, This is the Vedic construct, is this understanding that God owns and controls everything, right? Which is missing in today's society. Why people are feeling disconnected and unhappy and morose is because they don't know who they are. And one of the defining attributes of humans broadly is to know who you are, and then in that context of knowing who you are, what you should be doing. Most people don't know that, and therefore they're confused and unhappy. Right? And why I appreciated the association of the devotees so much, because they told me, you're not this body. You're a spirit. We have an identity separate from the gross and subtle body. That we, and that's who we are. That's our essential essence, right? That's our essence. And that just made so much sense to me, because I tried sex and drugs and rock and roll, and that was fun for a little while, right? But then it always ended in disaster. Sense gratification always ended in, there was some exhilaration, right? Some excitement with sense gratification, but then after, what happens? Have you tried it? What do you get? Huh? You get bored, yeah. What else? Huh? Distracted, yep. Ultimately what? No satisfaction. Ask Mick Jagger. Right? I can't get no satisfaction. I try and I try, but I can't get no. This is a common theme of modern literature, modern song, modern thought. Right? I work hard to be happy. I'm happy for a moment, but then poof, it goes. Right? Whereas those who are intelligent are looking for happiness which is enduring. Right? Which is a quality, ultimately, it's a quality of the Brahmanas. This is why Varnashram is so important, why Vedic culture, especially Brahminical culture, is so important, because the Brahmanas teach, what do the Brahmanas teach? Yajna. Well, first of all, teach the Vedas, Vedic knowledge, right? Teach it, practice it. And what does Vedic knowledge teach us? Yajna, right? That you're not the body, right? First and foremost. Dahinosmin yata dehe ko maram jovanam jara tata dihantara praptistiras tatra namuyati. Right? To be a sober person, which is really what Rupa Goswami is teaching in Upadeshamrita, right? Vacho vegam, manasakroda vegam, jiva vegam, udarapasta vegam. That's what a sober person does, control the mind and the senses and engage them within rather than chasing external things. Engage the mind and the senses on the pursuit of self-realization, because that's what gives us ultimate satisfaction. And if we pursue self-realization, all of the other things actually follow. We experience that as devotees. Right? The sense gratification is minimal, right? But it is enough to keep you happy without having to chase, money. Right? Which is what most people are doing. We're taught to chase money. Running, right? For money. Have you noticed? You might have even tried it. Right? We're chasing money, we get money, And we think, yoo-hoo! This is when I was working, especially I remember when I was working at Solver Paints. Friday night we'd get our pay, and then hanging around with the fellows at work, where would we end up on a Friday night? Down the pub. And then when you're down the pub, what do? Drink too much. This is Australian culture, actually. You know, if you don't go out on a Friday night with the people that you work with, then they think there's something wrong with you. Huh? But what I noticed was you go down the pub and then you spend all your money. Come on, mate, your shout, right? And then you spend all your money. It's just ridiculous, right? And there's some exhilaration, right? Some exhilaration from the fact that you can't walk straight. You can't walk straight, you can't think straight, you can't do anything sensible, you behave like an idiot, right? And this is having fun. I just was miserable. I think, what's the point of that? I wanted to be a yogi. Right? I wanted to be. So when I met the devotees, they said, yes, you know, here's how you do it. And what was the instruction? Chant Hare Krishna. Yeah, chant Hare Krishna. And that was very attractive. That was very attractive to me. Right? And of course the devotees didn't tell me this, but I learned later on, Krishna says, Jagyanam japa jagyosmi. What's the highest sacrifice? Right? Japa. Chanting. Right? That's Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, that's the highest sacrifice. Jagyanam japa jagyosmi. I am that. Right? So that was interesting. And then the other element is Kalo tadhari kirtanat. Right? In the age of Kali, the sacrifice is not only japa, but Hari Kirtan. Chant Hare Krishna. Right? That's the sacrifice. Not going into the Himalayas and meditating. Right? Not the performance of jagya, you know, big sacrifices. Like here, what Pururava's doing, lighting the fire, and lots of rules and regulations. Satya Yuga, it's Jayato Vishnu, meditating on Lord Vishnu. Not easy to do, you know, not easy to just sit down and do that kind of meditation. And what is it? Dvapayam parichajayam. Deity worship. Right? We do deity worship, but that's not the main purpose. The main purpose is, in this day and age, Kalo tadhari kirtana, just chant Hare Krishna. Right? That's very interesting if you look at the story, and this is one of the things one of the early stories that I heard from the devotees that attracted me so much was the story of Mrigarhi. Right? Narada Muni was travelling and he noticed, he saw this hunter, Mrigarhi, and he would, and it's very interesting, isn't it? The word hunter in English means somebody who kills, right? And the Sanskrit word for death is hunter. Same word. Right? Interesting, huh? So hunter means death, whichever way you look at it. Right? So Mrigarhi, but Mrigarhi, as he was taught by his father, wouldn't kill the animals immediately. He would kill them in such a way that they suffered immensely before they died. And he got pleasure from observing that suffering. Hellish, huh? Right? So Narada Muni saw Mrigari killing and inflicting so much suffering, and because Narada Muni is soft-hearted, right? Devotees are soft-hearted. And you know, that's a quality of a devotee. Of course, devotees can be hard-hearted sometimes too, but that's another thing. We can be tough on ourselves and tough on others. But broadly speaking, devotees are not hard-hearted, they're soft-hearted. Right? That's it, very nature. Because Krishna is soft-hearted. Narada Muni is soft-hearted because he's a great devotee and he understands the soft-hearted nature of Krishna. So even though we're in the material world and we have to suffer, right, that's still actually an extension of Krishna's soft-heartedness, right? That we have to suffer to appreciate the inadequacies of material existence, effectively, right? And ultimately turn to Krishna. And Prabhupada mentions in the Bhagavatam, more than one place, you know, we have to suffer in order to turn away from the material world and go back home, back to Godhead, right? So, and in that process, we appreciate our own suffering, but we also appreciate the unnecessary nature of that suffering and the unnecessary nature of the suffering for others. So Narada Muni saw Mrigari killing the animals, and he is thinking, I need to save this fellow from himself, effectively, right? So he preached to Mrigari, and he told him, you know, why are you doing this? And he said, well, I enjoy it. Why are you doing this? Why are you eating animals? Oh, I like it. Right? But then Narada Muni said, but do you know what you're doing? Because most people do these things and they don't even think about it. They're just like a bunch of lemmings walking off the edge of a cliff and drowning in the ocean. Unique feature of lemmings. And so people are like that. They just go with the crowd, not knowing the consequences of what they're doing. So Narada Muni, out of his soft-hearted nature, wanted to release, and this is all devotees pretty much, want to release those suffering, the consequences of material existence, to stop, do something positive, avoid the negativity, especially of killing animals, right? Why do we do it? Oh, we like it. But do you know what the consequences are? No, what's that? Right? So Mrigari was at least, it's interesting, isn't it? Despite the fact that he's an impious hunter, he took advantage of the association of Narada Muni. And so when Narada Muni told him, you're going to have to suffer for every animal that you've killed and the suffering that you've caused them, you have to suffer the same yourself. Right? And Mrigari was influenced and affected by the soft-hearted nature of Narada Muni. So, ooh, what should I do? So he told him, break your bow. In other words, break the means of your, detach yourself effectively, right? Be detached. And what did he advise him to do? Narada Muni is the chief of the Hare Krishnas, right? So what did he tell him to do? Can you guess? What did Narada Muni tell Mrigari to do? Chant Hare Krishna. Chant Hare Krishna. Well, actually what he told him, build a little hut, worship Tulsi every day, and chant Hare Krishna, because that, that goes to... And he was worried. He said, how will I maintain myself? And Narada Muni said, don't worry about that. You'll be looked after. Huh? You'll be looked after. And people started to come to see the change in the hunter. He was no longer a killer of animals and the cause of suffering, but he became a devotee, soft-hearted devotee. And so when people saw that, they were amazed. And so they gave them, he got more things than he needed. The local village people honored and respected Mrigari, even though he was a hunter, because he was now a devotee. And so one day Narada Muni came with Angira Rishi, I think it was. They came to see Mrigari, right? And Mrigari, when he saw his guru, he wanted to offer his obeisances, right? But he couldn't because there were ants on the path. So he wanted to sweep the ants away, right? But he couldn't. There were too many ants, so he couldn't pay obeisances to his guru, right? So Narada Muni noted, he said to his friend, look, this fellow was a hunter before who would inflict suffering on the animals that he killed for fun, for pleasure, and now he can't offer his obeisances because there's ants on the path, right? So see the change in the character of the hunter, right? And why? Because he was chanting Hare Krishna, right? So this is our jagya. Actually, Prabhupada says this. He says in the purport, this is all that is needed. Is to chant Hare Krishna, and in fact, that's what we should be doing. Devotees should be chanting Hare Krishna, and if we're chanting Hare Krishna properly, that will satisfy us. We'll be satisfied. We won't need any other material facility. Of course, we're in modern society, and so we need a car, we need a house, but actually we don't need those things ultimately. Right? And if we put those things above our chanting, we won't be happy. Right? We'll have the house, we'll have the car, we've got the kids, they're going to a good school, whatever. But if we're not chanting Hare Krishna properly, and certainly there's a science to chanting Hare Krishna, it's not just sniggity ram, hurdy-gurdy Krishna, right? There's, even though we say, and this is the beauty of japa actually, you don't need a big jagya, you don't need a temple, right? We actually don't need those things, as is evidenced by Mrigari. We just need a simple environment. and why, in our homes, we should have a place where we perform our puja, right? Where we chant our japa, right? In that sacred spot where we can concentrate just on chanting Hare Krishna. That's the most important thing in life. And if you do that, if you don't have anything else, you'll still be happy, right? And if you don't do that, you may have all of the other things, right? But you'll become, well, what happens is, sometimes, not always, you want what the devotees have got. How come you've got a peaceful situation? Give me that. I want that peaceful situation. Well, that peaceful situation can be arrived at by everyone, have a guess what? By, what do you think? Chant Hare Krishna. Yeah. That's why the Hare Krishna's ultimate line is chant Hare Krishna, right? But of course, with the whole, there's a whole culture, there's a whole construct behind why we chant Hare Krishna. Very important. Very, very important. And it's the Yuga Dharma. Jagyanam japa jagyosmi. Actually, at any time, the chanting of japa is Krishna. Right? So important. And kalo tad hari kirtanat, it's the so that's personal. And then the interesting thing about our yoga is that you do it personally, right? Sit down, chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, right? And it's done, and why it's unique, it's done also in Sankirtan, right? So if we do good japa, and if we go out and chant Hare Krishna, and it's very interesting, isn't it? Lord Chaitanya, when he started the Sankirtan movement, first of all, he had kirtan in Srivas Thakur's house, right? And it was private. In fact, the neighbours complained. Would you believe the neighbours complained because there was too much kirtan? And also they complained because, why won't you let me in? Well, we're not letting you in because you're not a bhakta. You're not a devotee. Or they might not say that, but it was a protected environment, right? Protected environment. And there's the story of the brahmachari who wanted to, let me into I want to be part of the kirtan. And somehow he managed to sneak in and he hid in the clothes basket. But then, partway through the kirtan, Lord Chaitanya said, there's something not right here. There's somebody who's not a devotee in the room. Just a voyeur, you know. And they eventually found the brahmachari in the clothes basket. Out. You're not a devotee. Out. He said, oh, come on. And the devotees begged on his behalf, you know. He's a brahmachari and he only drinks milk and eats fruit, you know. And of course, Lord Chaitanya said, these are not qualifications for entering into kirtan, right? Performing unnecessary sacrifices. Right? But rather one has to have the heart of a devotee and be submissive ultimately to the Guru and ultimately be submissive to Lord Chaitanya's mission, which is chanting Hare Krishna. Not as a performance or as something to be entertained by or you know, some cultural engagement, but rather it's the chanting of Hare Krishna Sankirtan is meant ultimately again for what? Bhaktaram Jagyatapasam Sava Loka Maheshvaram, right? It's meant for the pleasure of Krishna. Right? So eventually Lord Chaitanya took the Harinam party out. Right? So, you know, the chanting of Hare Krishna was a private or what should we say, an intimate, internal setting for the devotees. But Lord Chaitanya's mission wasn't only to engage in chanting Hare Krishna with the devotees, you know, for our personal spiritual benefit and ultimately for the pleasure of Krishna. So obviously nothing wrong with that. But Lord Chaitanya demonstrated that actually the chanting of Hare Krishna can be enjoyed and be beneficial for everyone and should be for everyone. And so therefore the fixed up devotees, the very fixed up and advanced devotees don't just chant Hare Krishna amongst the, you know, for themselves, but they take the Sankirtan party out on the street. Right? So it's not that we You know, it's nice to have a temple, no doubt, to attract people. It's nice. But we don't need a temple to chant Hare Krishna. Huh? Prabhupada started off with what? It's interesting, actually. When Prabhupada came to New York, what was he intending to do? You know the story? What was he intending to do? It's in the Lilamrita. He wanted to get money from businessmen in India and build a temple, start a temple in New York. Right? What happened to that idea? Didn't happen. Didn't happen. Many of Prabhupada's ideas, you know, he tried and it didn't work, so he tried something else, right? Like, first of all, he thought he would be a businessman, make a lot of money, then he'd be able to go and preach. Right? But what happened? What happened to Prabhupada's business? Finished. Right? Finished. So imagine, we see in Prabhupada's life how Prabhupada was always planning how to serve, how to serve, how to serve. Oh, try it like this. Right? Oh, try it like that. Right? But ultimately, what was successful? Printing books, which is what Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur did, that came from Bhaktivedanta Thakur, the book distribution, ultimately comes from from the Goswamis, right? And so Prabhupada, you know, went and he was encouraged by his guru, go and preach in English, right? Go and preach in English. So that's what he did. He went to America with his books. He thought, okay, I'll build a temple, I'll construct a temple. And what happened to that idea? No. Just started what? What did he start doing in 26th 2nd Avenue? What did he start doing? Kirtan, chanting Hare Krishna, and giving lectures, right? Preaching, teaching. Right? This is pretty much. And Prabhupada was very happy to it. Everything was very, what's the word? Engaging, peaceful, satisfying. Of course, Prabhupada wasn't satisfied because he knew that it wasn't just one preaching center, it was another one, and then another one, and then another one, all over the world, right? But initially came from chanting Hare Krishna. The devotees came from chanting Hare Krishna, and more kirtan, Bhagavad Gita, Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, more Sankirtan, really. That's the basis of what he did. Well, of course, temples did come later. But the temples on the basis of what? Chanting Hare Krishna. Yeah. So very interesting that Pururava's performing sacrifice for the pleasure ultimately of Lord Vishnu, but at the lowest level for his own personal benefit, to be with Urvasi, right? To have a son, which is basically the emblem of sense gratification more than anything, right? But according to the Vedic construct, it gets a tick, tick. Okay, fine, right? What's that verse in the second canto? What is it? Mukchukama udaradi. Whether you're free of desire or full of desire or desiring liberation, akama savakama va. Mokchakama udaradi. Right? Whether you have no desire, all desires, or you want liberation, still, well, ultimately, what's the Bhagavatam telling us? Chant Hare Krishna. It's okay. Because if we perform yajna, gradually we'll be purified. That's the point. So why Pururava's a good example for us because he performed sacrifice for the pleasure of Lord Vishnu, but set the proper example, even though his motivation was material. Fine. Right? And even we can encourage people, chant Hare Krishna. Material desires, no worries, chant Hare Krishna. No material desires, fantastic, chant Hare Krishna. You want liberation? Excellent, chant Hare Krishna. We have a one side. And why? Kalo tad hari kirtanat. Jagyanam japa jagyosmi. This is the basis of sacrifice for us. Make sense? Yeah. So what does Prabhupada say? Chant and be happy. Pretty difficult. And we see that with Mrigari. And in one sense, Mrigari the hunter exemplifies or is an archetype for all of us, especially in this day and age. The measure of our success in being a devotee actually is to be happy, to be gentle, like Narada Muni and like Mrigari. Be happy, be gentle, and be satisfied with simple, with the simple things in life. Don't complicate things too much. And within ISKCON, ultimately, that's really the measure of our success, is how peaceful and how happy we are as devotees. We shouldn't be disgruntled or unhappy or, fighting amongst ourselves. We then end up being no better than the Gamis, right? That's what they do, and that is not a good measure of Jagya. What is it? Bhaktaram Jagya Tapasam Sava Loka Maheshwaram. Be happy. Gyatva Mam Shantim Richati. So what's a devotee? Shanti. Om Shanti. Right? That's what we should be. We should be happy. And we know what makes us happy. What makes us happy? And service. We're chanting Hare Krishna and we do service. And we see it actually. The Jagya of Janmashtami, so many devotees sacrificing so much of their time and effort for the benefit of others. They're not doing it for their own. All we get out of performing these big festivals and managing temples is a headache. But we do it because we like to serve. Right? We may get some benefits, but that's not why we do it. Right? We don't do it because we get benefits. We do it because we like to serve and we like to make others happy. Right? And because we're making others happy, and we see it. So many devotees cooking, distributing prasadam, managing the crowd, collecting donations, because people want to reciprocate. Right? We give them so much. They come. There was a few ladies who came on the morning of Janmashtami, and I was out in the courtyard. Chincharupa and I were out in the courtyard talking to the devotees, and these ladies came up to us and they said, "Oh, Aniruddha Prabhu, it's so good to see you." Right? And I'm thinking, "Oh, who's this?" And then this lady said, "Do you remember my son?" And she told me, I forgot what his name is. And I said, well, I had to say, tell me. She said, 40 years ago, you did the mundan for my son. I said, oh, of course. And then the next lady said, do you remember my son? I said, tell me. She said, well, 35 years ago, you did his mundan, right? And these are obviously, they're 40 and they have their own kids. We probably did the mundan for their kids. Right? Or, there are some people like Vinny the other day. You know Vinny Vishnupriya? Vinny. We did his wedding. Oh, yes. Yeah, right. Well, I think I did his mundan. Right. Yeah. And so I've known Vinny's family and Usha, his sister. Yeah, I've known them since they were kids. Right? Now they're grown up. Well, now they're chanting japa. Right? Mum and Dad are getting ready to get initiated. Yeah, eventually, they So, these people, like Mrigari became a devotee because of the association of Narada Muni. Then we see, and the thing about those ladies was that they were saying they were just so happy to be at the temple on Janmashtami, right? And they just came out of the temple after having darshan and seeing Gaunitai, Radha Ballabha, Jagannath and Prabhupada. And they were just so happy to see the Jagya, effectively. This is cultured people. Bhavananda used to tell us this story of how on Janmashtami, the high-class people of Calcutta would go to their friends' celebration of Janmashtami and their worship of Radha Krishna, and they would just observe the colour, the decoration, the beauty of the puja, right? And then they'd observe all of the offerings. The opulence of the service to Krishna. And they weren't thinking, oh, where's the burfi? Where's my Mahaprasadam? Right? They're just appreciating, oh, this is wonderful. Look at the gorgeousness of the offering. Look at the jagya, in other words. They're appreciating the sacrifice, right, that's been performed. So we see that. The devotees like to chant Hare Krishna, and then they put themselves out to give people, ultimately, Krishna consciousness, prasadam, knowledge, festivals, chanting Hare Krishna, darshan of the deities. And so on Janmashtami, it was inspiring and inspired service for so many devotees. Right? Here, down at Casey, up in Hume, in Epping and in Wyndham at the Werribee Racecourse, thousands of people showing their appreciation, right, of the service to Krishna. Ultimately, that's what they're doing, and appreciating the sacrifice of the Hare Krishnas, who ultimately, what are they going to say? Chant Hare Krishna. That's what we tell people. Chant Hare Krishna. And of course, they'll accept it because they see the sacrifice and the satisfaction of the devotees. They're serving Krishna, happy to serve Krishna. Even at great personal inconvenience. And we see that. The cooks, the pujaris, the decorators, everybody pretty much. Especially on Janmashtami, such a wonderful demonstration of what the results of chanting Hare Krishna are, effectively. That's our Jagya. So, thank you, everybody. You're getting a little bit of what I'm going to say on Sunday. I'm preparing my class for Radhastami. Okay. Kantaraj Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Madhu Manjari's got a hand up. It's getting late. Yeah, go on.
It's a question and comment at the same
Sure.
I was appreciating in the first verse that Prabhupada explained
Effective jagya. Yeah, the system. There's a system. That's right. Yes. No. Well, interesting you say that, Madhu. But what does he say after that? He says in Kali Yuga, chant Hare Krishna.
Yeah, and I wanted to also, as I said, comment and question, because the importance of everybody being properly situated in the varna and
Varna, yes.
because of that, they would be able to do or play their role properly
Yes.
in the whole system
Yes.
in a harmonic way. And
Yep.
so, based on that position, everybody has different functions.
Everybody has a function. Yes, that's right.
Their quality, guna, karma.
Yes.
And because that is in organized system, so everything is harmonized, so contributing. Everybody can take part. But the point is, because you also mentioned the class that whatever we do, we offer to Krishna
Yes.
as a sacrifice. So my question would be, what actually sacrifice is?
What?
Actually,
Actually, the sacrifice is. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Yep. Okay. So you're saying, or your comment and question is, Prabhupada makes the point that Yajna can't be properly performed without the proper arrangement of Varna and Ashram, so that everybody can be engaged within that systematic glorification of Lord Vishnu. And that's why the role of the Kshatriyas is so important, to be guided by the Brahmanas, but to order society so there is so everybody's engaged appropriately, ultimately for the benefit of Lord Vishnu. That's the Bhagavad Gita, right? Basic Bhagavad Gita, in third chapter, right? And extrapolated in the fifth chapter as well. So, or expanded in the fifth chapter, because the performance of Yajna is initially for one's own sense gratification, but then ultimately the performance of your duty, in other words, Varna and Ashram, should be done without attachment to the result. In other words, ultimately for the benefit of everybody, or ultimately for the benefit of Lord Vishnu. That's the sacrifice, right? So, if that doesn't work, what does Prabhupada say? Or if that's not existent, what does Prabhupada say? Chant Hare Krishna. That'll do. And for Kali Yuga, Kalo Tad Hari Kirtanat, Hari Kirtan, right? And Jagyanam Japa Jagyosmi. These are the things that occurred to me this morning before I came. This is our Jagya. Japa, right? And Kirtan, Sankirtan. Both chanting Hare Krishna. Then we're seeing out of that chanting comes deity worship, comes the whole process, and then out of the purification of those activities comes a realization of our Varna and our Ashram, right? If we're chanting Hare Krishna with attention and carefully, and also with the guidance of a spiritual master, because that's critical for our advancement and for our engagement, right? The Guru helps the disciple understand Varna, understand Ashram, understand their service in that environment, ultimately with the desire to please Krishna. In other words, out of that comes a Varnashram system, and which is what Prabhupada wanted eventually. And of course, in this day and age, we don't have kings or administrators who understand the importance of Varnashram. Their focus is on sense gratification, right? Economic development, artha, kama, moksha, artha, kama, what is it? Artha, kama? Oh? Dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Yes, I forgot the Dharma part. So the Dharma part for us is chant Hare Krishna. And of course, you know, like Bhagavan Prabhu famously said, there's more comes out of the bead bag than just a finger. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. So the more we chant, the more the Krishna consciousness movement expands around us. Right? But what's the basis? Chant Hare Krishna. Simple. And that's all that's needed, actually. Right? We don't need all the other stuff if we're chanting properly. But ironically, if we chant Hare Krishna, then it all expands from there. A whole society. And we see it in our community, a society of wonderful devotees who work together to preach, ultimately celebrate festivals, encourage others to chant Hare Krishna. Is that okay?
Yeah, also, I was appreciating that based on that concept and understanding, so the ultimate concept of Jagya would be devotional service.
The ultimate concept of Jagya will be? Devotional service. Yes, absolutely. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Devotional service always accompanied with the glory, chanting the name of the Lord.
Yes. Yep. Anything else is ignorance. But don't be too fanatical about it, because you have to deal with it. You can't say, "Oh, you're a mode of ignorance character." Well, we could say that to people, but it's interesting actually. Prabhupada really knew how to fan the flame of somebody's interest in Krishna consciousness, despite the fact that they, like Narada Muni could have said to Mrigari, "You sinful wretch," right? "You mode of ignorance character. You unqualified." Just could have written him off, but he didn't. He preached to him and then encouraged him, and as a result of that, he became a devotee. So, you know, most of us are disqualified, frankly. Well, speaking for myself, disqualified, but got the mercy of the devotees. Yeah. Very nice. Thank you, Hare Krishna. Hare Bol.